Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well. Most likely you are aware of the fact that Taylor Swift is undergoing a new album cycle right now, The Life of a Showgirl, a project that is likely to be one of the biggest releases of the year already at the time of me shooting this video, with there being no single and not a whole lot of information to go off of. There's already been a lot of discussion and a lot of theorizing as to how this album's going to sound, what Taylor's going to say on it, and a host of other things. Now, I figured personally, because I'm curious about all this, what better person to talk to than Zachary the Swiftologist himself and get a sense of what he is anticipating from this record as the internet's foremost Taylor Swift commentator. So we talk about that and a lot more in this new conversation I have here with Zachary. Links to Zachary's work and YouTube channel down below in the description. Thank you for taking the time to come on.
Of course, I was kind of worried this was going to be enemy territory because I have seen some of your reviews. And, you know, as a Swiftie, I have to first say, kill yourself. And then we can proceed with our conversation.
That's what I thought. I thought this is going to be enemy territory. I'm going to say someone in my orbit was, you know, kind of offhandedly mentioning you in a positive way, in a nice way, and said, you should talk to Zachary. And I said that might actually be a good idea. And part of the reason that mention happened was I think you had said something about me, and I don't want to put you on blast here, get you in trouble, but I think you had said something.
Get me in trouble.
I think you had said something about me sort of being a somewhat positive force in the music journalism sphere, possibly, which, I mean, I'm sure there are people in the Swiftie sphere that heavily disagree with you on that point. Yeah. I'm
kind of like the Swiftie Chun-Li. So people like, they need me, but they hate me. So it's kind of a difficult like dichotomy that I walk there. But I have complimented you and said that you were a necessary force. I also have called you a bald-headed scallywag. So like there's two sides to every coin. And I think that this is a good place to be.
I don't think those 2 points are mutually exclusive. I think I can be both. I think both are true. Yes. I think both are accurate assessments. All right, let's ask what I think is probably the most basic question going into this new album cycle. You personally, as somebody who is obviously a Taylor Swift fan, has built a brand off of covering and dissecting her music, The Life of a Showgirl. Are you excited for this new album?
No, I hate it. Of course I'm excited. This is my event of the year. I'm super excited. I'm excited because there is like a clarity of idea and a focus that I haven't seen from her in a while. And I think that her collaboration with Jack Antonoff has kind of reached its natural conclusion for now. I don't think that's done or finished, but I do think that it has reached like an impasse. And reuniting with Max Martin is a brave and bold choice. I don't think that Max Martin's been doing great stuff in the last like 5 years-ish. It's not like it's the mid-2010s when he's like really everywhere and like scoring hit after hit. I loved what he did with Eternal Sunshine, but it is going to be interesting to see them revisiting this kind of like bulletproof melodic math. He kind of forces her to focus on like a tight structure, which is like less diary sprawl, which is what all of Tortured Poets and Midnights and Folklore and Evermore was. So I'm excited for the return of restraint.
Yeah, so you anticipate that this, and I do sort of see a little bit of this in the track list that we have seen so far, and we can get into that, but you think this is going to be a trimmer record, a trimmer experience. Like, what are you anticipating with that sort of like assessment? What are we going to see in terms of deluxe here? Do you think that this is going to be yet another release where we have the album come out and then another album drops immediately on top of it? Or we're seeing like this endless sprawl of like variations and non-album tracks and acoustic this, demo that, B-side the other thing?
I think we're going to see a lot of, I mean, she's money please. That's what I call her. So like money please has to strike, and that will happen. So there will be many variations of the album cover. I think acoustic stuff and remixes, unfortunately, are very possible. I usually just ignore them, but they will probably be like a part of this rollout. I don't see a deluxe track. She kind of explicitly said there wouldn't be any. And I don't see her doing a companion piece to this either, because it seems as though Taylor's very responsive to criticism and she's very iterative in the face of it. And the main critique that she got from Tortured Poets was there's too much. It's not tight or cohesive enough. It's sprawl. And she has very intentionally said that this is supposed to be kind of like a pure pop blockbuster. Really, she's drawing a lot of parallels between this and 1989. So she's setting a high bar for herself to clear, but I'm really excited to see what she has come up with in terms of a focused lens.
Okay. Now, as far as going back to Max Martin, I mean, I feel like you were kind of, giving a bit of a preview in your head in terms of where you think that's going to go. But for somebody who's in Taylor's position, just to kind of like explore this further and put a pin in it, like, do you feel like this is a good move? I mean, Max Martin is obviously a super talented producer, legend in his own right, but at this point in Taylor's life, narratively and personally, where she's like really in territory that she's never been before, does it make sense to go back in the way that she is? Because I mean, 1989 is so far away from the point that we are at now, like socially, musically, aesthetically. What could possibly be gained out of essentially rewinding here and maybe looking back to the past in a way, instead of kind of moving forward with maybe someone entirely new?
I think, well, Taylor does not really expand her creative circle. It's been very small over like the better part of 20 years. She has really not branched out too much. And going to see Max Martin in the first place was a big battle that she had to fight with her label. She had to really kind of get those 3 songs onto Red, the very first collaborations they did together. That was hard for her to achieve. And I think that going back to Max Martin is more about like the spirit of what their collaboration was on 1989 initially, rather than like a repeat of the sound. And that spirit was 1989 was, I always view it as like a bit of a neutered kind of arm's length distance when it comes to the songwriting. She was very much going for like vibe, tone, atmosphere over diaristic confessional. I'm pouring my heart out and telling you everything that I feel. Now she has something to protect, right? She has a relationship that is clearly very important to her. And the unfortunate following on from Tortured Poets is that that was a lot of oversharing. And now it's time to reel that back in. So I can see her playing with a lot more of like structure, sound, concept. I can see her maybe looking a little bit more at her position as a famous person rather than her position as a girlfriend. I think there will definitely be songs about Travis for sure, but I don't see that as being a focal point of this record. And going back to Max Martin is kind of an excuse for her to close the doors a little bit in terms of that sharing.
I do want to get into at least some of the sharing or personal narratives that are likely to come out of this record. But I mean, kind of going into what Max Martin is going to help Taylor bring to the table sonically, do you foresee maybe there being any motivation behind working with Max again, coming from the fact that, Max was so pivotal and so huge and so influential in terms of like crafting what a lot of us view as like the entire sound of 2000s pop? Which in a lot of respects, through a lot of recent album cycles and a lot of artists' recent hits, be it Charlie XCX and, obviously a lot of the people who have like, branched off of her brand and the whole Brat Summer thing. Like, do you think there's anything kind of driving Taylor to think like, well, I've previously worked with one of the biggest producers of the 2000s, and sort of that vibe, that aesthetic, that energy is kind of like back again. Do you see her getting in touch with that kind of sound and that kind of world, given that, that's kind of like Max's bread and butter?
I think Taylor is always after a pop hit. I think when she got a taste of what it was like to have a really big hit single, I mean, she was like maybe 4 or 5 years into her career before she had a #1 on the Hot 100. I think that accomplishment to her was a feeling of power and of influence. And the way that a song like a Max Martin hit can travel is different to the way that a song that she does with Jack Antonoff or a single can travel. The stuff that she did with Jack Antonoff, the biggest hit being Cruel Summer, I mean, one of her biggest songs of all time, that actually kind of sounds more like a Max Martin song. It's a lot more concise and brief and tight than any of her other pop songs with Jack Antonoff, which tend to be very wordy and they don't follow that like melodic math formula. Max Martin forces Taylor to really rein it in because she has to adhere to the structure of the song. That's the most important thing to him, is that melodic math. It has to come before lyrics, before story, before vocal performance. Everything else is like an ornament to that core of the song. And I think that she is very intelligent when she writes. And I think that she likes to challenge herself. And I think at this point, like post like losing access to her master recordings and going into Folklore and Evermore, that era was really about like hyper productivity and not being reined in and not taking feedback and not editing. And now I think she's looking more at like, okay, well, I pushed editing aside. I indulged myself. What can I gain by holding back, and who can help me achieve that? And I think that when Taylor does pop, she's shooting for something at this point that is so big that she needs someone that is like a real architect of that specific kind of bubblegum thing to come in and lift her up.
I mean, in a way, and I don't know what maybe you could add to this thought, or correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like, in a way, Midnight's was kind of like that sort of album cycle, or at least her trying to edit things down or simplify things, but with Jack, obviously.
Right.
You know, do you feel like there was something about attempting that sort of formula or attempting that sort of direction with Jack that it maybe was just, I don't know, not as beneficial, or I don't know exactly what I'm getting at, but you know, are you saying she foresees like herself getting more out of simplifying things with Max than she does with Jack once again? Because she could do another record with Jack that's kind of like a straightforward pop type experience.
Well, Jack is not really supposed to be a huge mainstream pop producer. He's kind of best in that alt pop, slightly left of center mainstream pop. He's not designed or able, I think, to really craft the kind of hit like a Style or a Blank Space or a Shake It Off. That's just not in his wheelhouse. He's a relational producer. I think he's more interested in like facilitating the artist's wildest imagination. He's not really interested in like editing or cutting or briefing things. He wants to ornament things. There's a really good example of like the version that he wanted to put of The Lakes on Folklore, which was the bonus track, versus the version that Taylor asked him to make. And his version of it is a lot more like, it's more cinematic. There's just more stuff going on. And I think that her instinct generally as a songwriter is actually to do less from a sonic perspective. She's really focused on the lyric and the melody. So the pop songs that were done on Midnights were not, I feel like these are the songs that you would take to Max Martin and say, help me fix this. And he would go, there's a great pop song in here. I need to cut some of the stuff around it. Like Bejeweled, for example, is one of those songs that there's a really great Max Martin hit in there, but it's surrounded by so much stuff that it just kind of gets lost. I think Antihero is probably the most straightforward pop thing they attempted to create together, but he just doesn't have that kind of like bombastic, punchy pop thing that like really elevates. The only time I've ever really seen him do that is with Cruel Summer.
Yeah, I mean, for a record that very is kind of like directly a pop album, the vibe and a lot of the instrumentation is kind of muted. You know, it doesn't jump out at you. There's kind of like a subtlety to it.
Midnights is a confusing record because she was confused when she was making it. Like she was basically trying to let us know that like the relationship with Joe was on the rocks without letting us know. So it was vague and it was unintentionally distant. And I think that that comes through in the production as well. Like the production is like burying a lot of what she's saying. A song like Midnight Rain, for example, is very resonant, but sounds weird because it is simply just overproduced. There's too much stuff going on. And I think that Midnights was an obfuscation record. Like it only became clearer the more that it unfolded, like as it continued to progress. And we heard songs like You're Losing Me, which was an addendum like 7 or 8 months after the record and the 3 a.m. edition came out. It's the most dynamic Taylor Swift record in that it keeps changing. Like the more information and context we have about what happened afterwards, the more that record starts to make sense, both in like from the way she was approaching it and what the songs actually mean. But I came away from my first listen to Midnights, the first like 13 tracks before I heard the 3 a.m. tracks being like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? What's the purpose? Like, this doesn't feel like a strong Taylor Swift album statement. She usually has such a clear vision to me. And that's why I thought it didn't deserve Album of the Year. I just don't think that it was her most cohesive or well thought through body of work.
Let's get a little bit into what you're anticipating in terms of like the narrative angle or the concept maybe, or the major themes that we're going to hear on this forthcoming record. I mean, in a very surface level read, I think you could say like there's probably going to be quite a bit of commentary on this album in terms of Taylor's relationship to her fame, you know, and just like just how she exists as one of the most famous pop stars and most successful pop stars on the planet. Which, I mean, you know, understandable in one respect, because that's like literally the life that she leads. And, you know, only she's going to be able to bring perspective to that in a way that only she can. But with that being said, as you as a fan who's observed her very closely for years, do you feel like we've gotten a lot of commentary and sort of like I guess what I want to say is insight into her life in this respect already, not only through song, but through the various ways that in the social media age, she's kind of like let fans in to sort of like better understand the state of her career and, you know, how that works into her art and her relationships and how she just kind of exists day to day.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of that, but the kind of what I would offer you in that, because I feel like where that's going would be, do we have too much of it? Is it boring? Are we over it? Is it like inside baseball? Like, have we had enough
what
of
else
hearing
can
about
be
how
said?
famous Taylor is?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the Eras Tour is kind of like an apex of success that I don't think has been replicated by any other pop star or artist maybe in the world.
Sure.
So there is an experience there to discuss. I mean, the physicality of that show. This is something that was really not discussed very much at the time, but the effort, the exertion that went into executing that many shows of that length at this scale was something that really took a hard beating on her body. She talked about this in the New Heights interview. And she said that this album was kind of about that moment when she gets home from a show and she's like covered in the smell of like sweat and perfume and like really like bone exhausted, but wide awake and has something to say. I think that there are certainly indicators from Tortured Poets of where we might go with this. I mean, when we hear a song like Clara Bow, that is a really compelling, it's not even really about her. It's an observation about how women are treated as famous people and also just as people in general, the expectation to be new, to be everything, to be replaced. I really see a parallel between that and Olivia Rodrigo's All American Bitch. Like there's like a connective tissue there. And I think that when we see tracks like Elizabeth Taylor, and some people are speculating that Wood could be about Natalie Wood, The Fate of Ophelia, like I think she's been more interested in drawing, I guess, parallels between her and other women that have met certain fates or have been given certain prescriptions of who they should be in the public eye. And Rebecca Harkness, The Last Great American Dynasty, like she has been expanding the way that she talks about that. So when I look at a song like Blank Space, which I would say is the first time she really addressed her position in the public eye in an unrelatable way, and then I look at something like Clara Bow, the difference between those two songs and what's being said is so vast that I'm excited to kind of explore more of that middle, because I don't think that she has really articulated some of the things that are going to be said on this album about being a showgirl, because a showgirl is someone who's always alone at the end of the day. Like a showgirl is someone that is giving you everything and leaving with nothing. And that's a hard and strange and lonely place to be.
With some of the anticipated songwriting on this record, you were just kind of like making note of what you feel might be some of the relatability going into it, the relatability factor. At this point in Taylor's career, and this is just my outside observation, I feel like there's almost like an element of that she's just gone so far into these high levels of success and fame. And, you know, lots of people have experienced this, you know, who are in the entertainment industry to some degree. I feel like she's kind of lost that relatability factor, whether she wants to have it or not. Like, do you feel like that's an element of her music she's going to try to bring back? Is it totally lost? Does it even matter at this point to the general Swift audience?
I think it really depends on who you're talking to. I think if she's aiming for something that is like 1989, that is like penetrative in a market that maybe is not automatically laid up to be Swiftie positive, then it has to be something that feels a little bit more broadly applicable. But then you look at a song like Blank Space, there's nothing relatable about that. And it's like one of her most successful songs ever. I think people focus too much on the content of what she's saying and less about the feeling that it evokes. Reputation is an album that I would say is one of her most conceptual, most focused on like who she is as a public figure. And it has had such a revisit as a highlight of her catalog. And what people relate to on that record is not the fact that she's like a famous person that's been canceled. What they relate to is feeling like you are in love and that the world does not want to support your love, that feeling like people are kind of preying on your downfall and also trying to execute vengeance against people that have wronged you. These are like very core base emotions that are delivered through the experience of her fame. And I think that it makes it both relatable and interesting because it's unique. So it's like finding a different way to talk about a common emotion is always, I think, the best way to go with a pop song.
I kind of love the way you phrased that a second ago to kind of get like a read on what you feel like the temperature of the water is right now. Do you think we're currently in a Swiftie positive or like a Swift positive market? You know, it's like what is the general Swift perception right now, and how do you think that's going to play into the success of this album, regardless of how good it is or isn't? You know, just take out of the equation how good the record is or isn't as just kind of a non-factor here. How much Do you think just like the public's perception of Taylor as of right now, be it positive or negative, is going to play into the success of the album, given whether or not people kind of generally vibe with her or don't right now?
Great question. I think the issue that she is coming up against now is that there is so much lore and there is so much about her that even music reviewers, when they're trying to sit down and assess an album, cannot help themselves but spend 50 to 60% of the review talking about her, who she is, what she does, completely extraneous to the music itself. And that, I think, really puts her at a disadvantage, because an album like Tortured Poets, to me, was received at a time of oversaturation. So she was like really just kind of everywhere all at once. That protracted album rollout while the Eras tour was going on top of it, there being so much content and so many variations and so many other things going on in pop at the time, really did not set it up for a very positive reception, or even what I think to be a good faith reception. I think people were tired of her and they were looking for an excuse to kind of turn the tides. There had been a lot of Tay positivity. So I think we were in an extreme place of Tay negativity at like the middle of 2024 kind of end as well. And now she always knows when to go away and when to be quiet and when to take a beat. And she really has been resting for this year. She's been like almost silent and missing, given how present she's been in for the last 2 or 3 years in the public eye. So I think that giving people a break is a good idea. And also hard launching Tavis with this album at the same time is very endearing. People really care about that relationship, which is befuddling to me, but that endears her greatly to the general public. People really like this cheerleader and football man. There's something primitive about it that people enjoy.
Yeah, there is something that's kind of like, hardcore traditional Americana about, just the Taylor Kelsey vibe together, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's kind of strange. I personally am not super into being invested in her relationships. I view her boyfriends as like purses. They're like accessories that she wears, and I like them when she's wearing them, and when she discards them, I'm no longer interested in them. But people are invested in this relationship and also in Travis Kelce. Like he had a GQ cover come out at the exact same time as the podcast that came out announcing her album. It's coming out on his birthday. Like there's a synergy here that has never happened before. And I think people are really interested to see what that is going to be.
Well, I mean, regardless of, I guess, your personal investment in it, I feel like we do need to kind of address this elephant in the room, because, I mean, I feel like even people who are just kind of only casually aware of Taylor Swift and her music sort of like have at least in their own minds an understanding of kind of the significance that relationships play in a lot of her music. And going forward from here, how do you foresee the relationship that we're kind of seeing her in very publicly at this point kind of playing out in at least maybe a few of the songs on this new record? Because, I mean, at least from what Taylor and Travis have publicly portrayed thus far, as far as the quality and kind of the vibe of their relationship, it's very different than any sort of relationship Taylor's like been known to be in previously, because it feels like such, and again, this is like not, I personally, I don't know. I don't know what the quality of the relationship is like. It could be good, could be bad.
Neither do I. None of us do. But there is like an element of it that does feel kind of PR oriented, to where it's like, they kind of everything is material.
They present together publicly in a way that's like both to their benefit, depending on what they have to say and what the time is and where it is and so on and so forth. So, with that, do you feel like there could be, with her writing going forward, or at least during this era, a hesitance of digging into that in any way out of fear of kind of like, ruining whatever perception her and Travis might want to put out there publicly when they're doing a conversation, she's at a football game, having a little fun podcast moment together, whatever, sort of like doing anything songwriting wise that could dig beyond that into something darker, tense, I don't know, could make it difficult to have those moments when it sort of, have those moments when they need to happen for I don't know, I guess like a good news cycle for both of them or something. I don't know.
It's a good question. I think in general, she's less worried about how people would perceive the relationship and more worried about fame as like an actual corrosive force in the relationship itself. Because in her last public relationship that went on for a very long time, you can hear in the songs, this is a subject that is litigated ad nauseum on so many of these albums, including all the way through Folklore and Evermore, which were allegedly fictional, but actually most of those songs stem from an experience that she was having in her real life. And you can kind of, with the Easter eggs, with the knowledge of the lore, you can like connect the dots there. I think that she found a way to write about her relationships with Folklore and Evermore in a way that allowed it to be protected as it was happening in real time. So she could work things out and talk about difficulties they were having without relating them to her real life. It was kind of the best of both worlds, but unfortunately the jig is up with that. Like we've now understood through Midnights and Tortured Poets, she's explicitly told us that's what she was doing, which limits her ability to do it again, plausibly, like with people actually believing that this is not about XYZ. So this album to me, when I look at the track list, it's not giving a lot of Travis content to me. I think if we're going to get anything, it's going to be positive. It's going to be about a period in their relationship where they were really still getting to know each other. I'm not seeing anything talking about like the struggles they may have gone through, a fight they may have had, which is different because that was definitely present from the very beginning of her last relationship on Reputation and Lover. Even though she was hedging, it was still clear that there was something not right about it. And she definitely seems more protective of this. She has more to lose. She's invested more in it. And she's found someone who wants to match her freak in terms of loving attention. So they're both invested in like this relationship being successful. And a good way to ruin that relationship being successful would be to say things you wouldn't want people in public to talk about.
No, absolutely. You know, I guess like, you know, have you seen or do you personally feel any kind of like, you know, fear or, you know, like concern as a result of that with her songs going forward in terms of feeling like, well, you know, maybe up until this point in your music, I've loved your frankness and I've loved your honesty when it comes to like the topic of the relationships that you've been in. And as a result of this, are you going to be less honest with me now? You know, do you feel like that's a concern or something that you're going to be worried about with, you know, future songs on topics like this?
I think I really trust Taylor's ability to make me feel like she's relating to me. I have never once really felt like I was super distanced from her. And I've been a fan for such a long time. I went to a secret session. I've been in her house. There is a connection and a bond that I have with her that isn't really going to be disturbed by her putting me at arm's length for a while. She did that on 1989, and that was like her most successful album of all time. So she is definitely capable of like maintaining a distance. I think it's just about like the best way to get people off the scent of like really wanting relationship tea is to make really fucking good pop songs. That is just, if you give us another style about having a sexy moment with Travis, like people are going to be interested in that and they're not going to start digging for the problem, especially now. This is the first album that is going to be ostensibly having him as a main character. He featured briefly on Torture Poets, but I don't foresee this being like a deep dive into their relationship or like going into the ins and outs of it. I think it's definitely going to look at him as like a character in a wider universe.
Okay. No, that's fair. So you were kind of going into the track list earlier and the way some of the name drops and references and nods may play into, you know, this storytelling angle she's most likely going to go into in terms of this commentary on fame. But another track list that has like grabbed a lot of people's attention is the song Canceled. And, you know, there's been a lot of theorizing and discourse around like what the heck this song could possibly be, even, you know, with it being stylized with the exclamation point and everything like that. Like, what do you feel like Taylor possibly has to say in terms of her own career on that kind of front? You know, like, what do you feel like cancellation is in the eyes of Taylor Swift and how she might explore that as an idea and a concept on a song such as that?
Well, I like to call what you're describing math, which is when people like make a lot of noise about nothing. Like they don't have any information about it. So they just start cooking in a way that's like not reasonable. That's right. The entire Swiftie bag, right? Like it's a derangement to be a Swiftie. But just using like context clues, being canceled is something that she likes to think and talk about. It's obviously an experience that was very damaging to her. It really hurt her profoundly. Swifties get very mad at me when I say this, but I'm tired of hearing about the Kim Ye situation. I'm over it. She's expressed it in 18 million different ways, and it's just diminishing returns. So like the way that she discussed that situation on Torture Poets to me was not creatively or artistically interesting. Of course, she has a right to talk about it if she wants to, and it still haunts her. But I'm kind of like, can we come up with something else? If we're going to talk about it, let's come at it from a different angle. I'm tired of hearing the same thing over and over. To me, I see like a parallel here between canceled and karma. The exclamation point really is giving fun and funny. And I think a lot of the times people underestimate her sense of humor. She's kind of dry and can be sarcastic and funny. And I really don't get that this is going to be like a serious, thank you, Amy, Cassandra moment. I was persecuted and now I'm free and nobody believed me and I'm sad. This is giving something like tongue in cheek. And could it be about her resilience to being canceled? Is she kind of de facto uncancelable now? Has she survived and weathered every kind of storm that a public figure can? I don't know. I mean, because she's talking about the life of a showgirl in 2025, part of being a showgirl is reckoning daily with the fact that you might just get canceled. That's part of it. And that could be an interesting thing that she cooks on.
Yeah. I mean, do you as a fan of Taylor's music and somebody who has observed the trajectory of her career, do you feel like there's any gas left in the tank in terms of like working this idea or presenting to the audience this idea that like, I'm the underdog here and, there are these people in the music industry that have it out for me? Because, I mean, as of right now, from what we can see with the purchase of her masters, with Kanye West out here pitching a crypto coin, pretty much
Tay Voodoo. All her enemies fall.
Pretty much every major Taylor Swift enemy that has been out there in the music industry has been sort of like thwarted in their own way or has been sort of like cast aside. And as a result of that, does it make sense to keep exploring the idea of like everyone's out to get me or, I'm at a point of weakness because there are these people working against me? Does that sort of narrative even work or function at this point? Can we sort of like see the sun breaking through the clouds now? I guess is what I want to ask.
You have to understand that Taylor has almost never been the underdog, and she is very good at positioning herself as one. And it's this like persecution complex that she has that I think is very interesting, because if you think about it, like, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but like the master recording situation, that was a legal situation that a contract she willingly signed that didn't go the way that she wanted it to after the fact that the terms of the contract concluded. I am 100% on her side. I hate Scooter Braun. I think that he should, Tay Voodoo needs to come and get him and Scott Borchetta. I'm over it. But she definitely brilliantly positioned that as a moral fight. That was about like her right to own her own work. And it didn't really always line up with the exact reality of what was happening. I agree with the emotional truth of what she was saying, but she's very good at like taking the truth and then creating an emotional truth that might not actually line up with like the actual facts of the matter. But to me, the truth is kind of irrelevant because the emotional extrapolation is what I'm interested in. She's a very compelling public figure because she knows how to spin things in her favor. And that means that this is like kind of an endless feature of her catalog. What different kinds of ways can she perceive herself as someone who is in a period of persecution? I mean, she could give you an argument any time of the day about why this is a particularly bad time to be Taylor Swift, I think. And I'm open to hearing more about that because I think that it reveals a lot about her psyche and her self-image and like how she views herself and her role in the public eye. And I definitely do think that the master recordings, her plight to own her masters is going to be something we hear a lot about. And I think it was a very empowering move for her. And for the record, on my live stream, when I watched the New Heights podcast, I bawled my eyes out. I sobbed because that personally felt like I was getting my masters back. And that's deranged, but that's how it felt. And I can't lie.
Honestly, like even as somebody who knows that Taylor Swift is as successful as she is and is as powerful as she is in the music industry, like even I myself feel like that's a cool thing, that like more artists should be able to achieve themselves with their own catalog. Like you say, a lot of these things are contract obligations and artists sign them sometimes without fully understanding what's going on, and artists can for sure be ripped off. I mean, record labels are out here doing what they do and they need to make a buck as well. But I don't see any reason why at any point we can't sympathize with the idea of artists wanting to own their own work, regardless of how successful they are. Yeah, I mean, that's an understandable feeling. You want to own the things that you create, even if a label is using them to generate profits for themselves. You want to own that stuff.
especially for an artist like Taylor Swift, whose entire discography is built off of like her blood, sweat, and tears. Like this is her life in music. So I think it's easy for people to understand why she was a victim in that situation, even if, again, the facts of the matter don't necessarily point to it being 100% a moral wrong that was committed in the universe. It's more interesting to kind of get behind the idea that Taylor is really good at like elevating consciousness on certain topics when she is able to apply the lens to herself. So because she was able to understand how it felt to have her masters taken out from under her, she did a lot of really great work in terms of educating young artists on why they should ask for their master recordings. I mean, Olivia Rodrigo said very clearly that she wouldn't have thought to have asked for her master recordings had she not kind of heard about Taylor's struggle. And now imagine how, we can only imagine how valuable her catalog is, and she owns her masters. That's a pretty sizable accomplishment and like a seismic consciousness raising that Taylor did by being the victim.
Right. Yeah. And even if she wasn't like technically wrong contractually in the midst of all of this, like just the idea of her work or any artist's work shifting from the ownership of a label to, you know, getting mixed up in the
private
dark
equity.
Abyss. I was going to say the dark abyss that is private equity is like so fucking.
It feels wrong. It's antithetical because it's like
it's wrong. It's gross.
You signed a contract, but art is more than that, right? This is not to the label heads. Of course, it's 6 albums that you were contractually obligated to deliver. To her, that's her life. It's not just her work. It's everything. So to have that not taken from you, to have that reverted away from you is painful. And I think that people really did relate to that. Even if you were like Taylor agnostic or Taylor negative, I think most people actually can empathize with this specific predicament she found herself in.
Yeah, it's the same reason a lot of people feel gross when they, you know, come to understand that like Spotify's Daniel Ek is like investing money in military tech. You know what I mean? You don't want to think of your favorite music that you enjoy or your favorite playlists that you know, spin on the way to work day in and day out, going to fund weapons or, you know, sort of like making the housing market more unequal or, you know, closing businesses and stuff like that. It's just weird.
It bursts the bubble. It destroys the fantasy. But it's true. I mean, commerce and pop music specifically, like those two things, one doesn't exist without the other. There's an element of like for sale about pop music that you must acknowledge. And with Taylor Swift, it's very apparent. And I think that's what draws people to her and what puts people off.
Going forward from here, I would like to kind of talk about a little bit and explore just your very interesting place in the Taylor Swift fandom, because as you sort of like said, as we kicked this conversation off, you know, you do have a reputation for being critical of Taylor's work, but simultaneously, you make a lot of very good, consistent quality content that dives into her albums and her music very seriously and very thoroughly. But again, some of the things that you say obviously are going to put you, and some of the observations you make, they put you in hot water with a lot of her most hardcore fans. And, you know, in your experience, what has it been like to kind of like walk that balance and, you know, be in this position where simultaneously people are looking to you for guidance, for information, for perspective, but also, you know, there are tons of videos and commentaries on you saying you're this, you're that, you're cancerous to the fandom and whatever else?
Well, I think there's a part of it where like, you know, you have to learn from Taylor. People's like abstractions of who you are not who you are. And it's best to ignore most of it. I mean, sometimes I will respond. Like if Justin Tranters is going to come at me and say something kind of bad, I need to respond. I need to clap back. So there are certain instances where I like to assert and be defensive. But I would say in general, like the Swifties, people who hate Taylor Swift think that I'm up her ass. And the deranged Swifties who think she can do no wrong think that I'm a secret covert hater and I have this like large mission to make as much money as I possibly can off of Taylor and exploit her. And I really hate her and I want to see her lose. So the fact that I'm like perceived as Chun-Li by both of those two groups, I think that I'm kind of somewhere in like a rational, logical middle. Obviously, I skew more towards Tay positivity. I am a fan, but I think I'm also older, like I'm not 18. And I've had my moments of like huge fandom. Like I had a long history in the fandom as just a fan and not a critic before I started doing this. And I remember after I went to the secret session for Reputation, which is kind of the ultimate fan experience that you can have, being in her house, meeting her, talking to her, that after that, I was kind of like, okay, now I can really look at this body of work in a way that I have not allowed myself to before, or have not allowed myself to vocalize at the very least. And that was, I guess my turning point, I kind of got everything I wanted from a fan perspective and was like, I care deeply about this body of work. And I think that if you care about something, you want to critique it so that it can be its most robust self. I want to show up to a dinner party and be able to defend every single creative decision Taylor Swift has ever made. And I can't if she's making weird decisions that I can't understand or don't agree with. So I think it's important. Like, Taylor's also an extremely agile and receptive artist. Criticism has only ever helped her. And I think that this album is just going to be another reiteration of that. Like, it seems the way that she's presenting it is entirely in direct response to all of the criticism she got from Tortured Poets. And that makes me excited.
Yeah, that's kind of, I don't disagree with that assessment. It's just funny to sort of like see that and agree with that and observe that, but simultaneously, many of her most hardcore fans are anti-criticism of her and sort of like take it upon them and take it upon themselves to prevent criticism of her, when in fact, like, some of the observations that I feel like, you know, you have made and generally have been made about some of her album cycles recently are fair. There are a lot of tracks on Midnights that are underwhelming. Tortured Poets, as far as an album cycle, a body of work, and just a, you know, whatever it is in terms of size and scope, it's a lot, you know? And those records probably could have benefited from maybe a bit more punch or maybe a bit more editing and kind of like, you know, bringing it down in terms of like overall message and focus. And yet, you know, to some listeners and some fans, to even utter these things can be perceived as heinous.
Or sacrilegious. I mean, I do walk a very fine line with not triggering the Swifties too much, but at this point I've kind of stopped caring because they will overreact to everything that they do. So I might as well just say whatever the hell I want. Like, there's no point trying to temper any criticism because even the smallest thing is perceived as like a hate crime against her. And you'll be like called a misogynist, called whatever. Like, they will just make stuff up about you. So you might as well just say what you really mean. And I think that it's been they wouldn't agree, but I think I've been a good force in the Swiftie community because there is not a lot of people that are willing to put their name and face behind actual legitimate criticism of Taylor Swift with informed knowledge of her work. So you kind of throw a spanner in the works when you do that to them. And I like to piss them off sometimes.
I mean, I'd like kind of your take on this observation of some in the Swiftie community without sort of like, you know, being overly negative or hateful or anything like that. But I have seen in the wake of, you know, this new album cycle and, you know, her recent podcast with Travis, and I'm sure you've seen some of the videos where people are like, you know, looking at the books behind her and being like, oh, because this book is behind her. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. You know, do you buy into the idea or the comment off of that sort of behavior, those observations, that very sort of like intense surgical sort of, you know, exploration of every single thing in her orbit as being kind of like, hey, Taylor, thank God for her because she's saving these people from going down the QAnon rabbit hole. Because if they weren't if they weren't conspiratorially exploring her, they'd be, I don't know, taking ivermectin or something.
Yeah, Swifties are at a place of derangement that has reached kind of like a breaking point because there are like now factions of Swiftie. Like, I wouldn't consider myself in conversation with a Gaylor. That's someone that I think has like completely lost touch with reality and is doing QAnon. That is QAnon for liberal women. Gaylor, believing that Taylor Swift is a secret lesbian. Like, they think that Scott Swift has her under a Britney Spears style conservatorship and is forcing her to perform and pretend that she's dating Travis and that all of her boyfriends are gay and they're all in relationships.
I'm unaware of this theory, by the way.
It's demented. I didn't even know I have to know. I have to be made aware of it because it's my business to know. You do have to know.
You do have to know.
I wish I didn't.
I'm not that deep.
But that theory made it to the New York Times. The New York Times ran an op-ed that basically covertly like did all of the Gaylor nonsense in public. And I had to make a 50-minute video being like, this is fucking crazy. Like, this is, I laid out why it was conspirational theory, like how every part of this logic was like not rooted in any reality and should never have passed muster with any sort of editorial guideline. But I mean, the New York Times are doing too much all the time anyway. But I think, yeah, the math can get a little bit too much. And I have kind of clocked out of doing numerology. Like, I'm too old to be counting tiles. I don't want to sit there and like do nonsense. I would like to work with information that I have in front of me. So a track list, I can look at a track list and start pontificating about what might be going on there. I don't want to look at a little figure of Pinocchio and wonder what that means. I would rather just wait for the album to come out and learn it for myself. And these theories are always wrong. They're always wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there is kind of like a sense when I do talk to, yourself included, obviously, certain Taylor fans. Another instance recently that I had was, I'm sure you're aware of at this point, songwriter Mr. Brendan Abernathy, the, you know, married in a year guy, who I talked to on this, you know, channel as well. Did an interview with him after he was blowing up. And, you know, he's obviously a big Swiftie himself. And I can't remember if he just kind of said this to me privately, but, you know, he himself was kind of going into his love for her music and how she inspired him. But, you know, there was a point where explicitly he was like, you know, I love Taylor Swift, but I'm not that kind of Taylor Swift fan. I just want you to know. And I didn't even ask him or, you know, press him on that, but he just wanted to make sure that I knew off the bat that he wasn't sort of like this stereotypical obsessive sort of Taylor Swift fan. I just like her music. I just enjoy her music. I'm just passionate for her music. I've seen her live. I think she's great. But, you know, it's like I'm not doing, as you say, sort of the
I mean, listen,
math.
some of it is fun. Some of it is just like harmless, clean fun. Who are you hurting by zooming in on the books in the back? Like really,
and also
the point where it becomes crazy is when it goes to Scott
conversation.
Swift's conservatorship. That's what I don't like about the Easter eggs, is that it opens this kind of trap door into a lot of insane derangements. And this is also a trap that Taylor laid herself by planting like much more revealing Easter eggs in the earlier part of her career. And in this interview with Travis, she said very clearly, I don't leave Easter eggs about my personal life. That's like a direct address to the Gaylors. That's like, stop it. Stop this behavior. Enough. I'm leaving Easter eggs about my career. To me, that's not a real Easter egg. Like, I don't care if you're leaving an Easter egg about what number a track is going to be. That is not relevant information to me. But back in the day, the Easter eggs used to be like, she was letting us know who the songs were about. And she doesn't do that anymore. But the Swifties have not adjusted their ability to overanalyze things for this new way that she's interacting with it. And I mean, it's smart for her. It just builds up interest and it's free promo. Like, she barely does promo for albums anymore. The fans just do the math and it goes viral.
No, like you said, there is an element of harmlessness to it, and it can be cool. I mean, you know, I saw some of these videos that were educating Swiftie fans on who Basquiat was because just one of his books was in the background, which I'm like, okay, that's cool. Not every
they need
day
to
that I'm
know.
seeing,
they need to know. Let me tell you, they're not knowing too much. They need to know stuff.
They should know. You know, the thing is, if it leads to a conversation on how great of an artist he was, sure, why not? There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But you know, there is, I think, like, you know, an interesting parallel here that I see sometimes to an artist like Kendrick Lamar, for example, because he obviously, you know, puts a lot of like double entendres and wordplay
World
and
maker.
so on and so forth. And, yeah, exactly. Into his music. And as a result, sometimes when he is playing it super straight or super simple and straightforward in his songs, like, you do have a case of a lot of fans who are still like trying to read beyond everything that he's doing on the surface and be like, this actually means this. And it's like, no, you know, he's being very straightforward. It even leads to some fans on a record like GNX, for example, which obviously was very consciously a record from him where he's like, I'm streamlining everything. I'm making bangers. I'm making straightforward cuts. I'm not trying to be super lyrical. Back to basics. I'm telling you literally on the first track, I'm not going to do too much wordplay. I want you to feel everything I'm saying immediately, but still it leads to a lot of like almost disappointment because it's like, oh, this isn't one of his best records because it's not like, you know, making me rewind every line to sort of like overthink everything that he's saying. So like you say, sometimes there's like a weird adjustment fans need to make with later records or different records because not every album is going to be filled with those Easter eggs or those layers. It can be pretty exhausting creatively to have to try to do that every time.
Well, it pisses me off too, because sometimes I'm like, can you not just take her at her word? Like, people don't trust her anymore in a way. They think that there's always something more. And that's where the conspirational behavior starts. It's like, oh, she's lying. She's hiding. She's obfuscating something because once she did this before. It's hard to like get people to come back from that and just understand that karma is a cat purring in my lap. And that's all. Like that's it. That's all. It's funny. It's a joke. Haha. Like, we're just having a kiki. Some people are not able to like turn the conspirational detective thing off. And that means that our conversations about the music do suffer sometimes.
Last thing I wanted to dive into here is another bit of discourse that I've been seeing a lot as of late. And that's that a lot of people seem like, and I don't know where you fall on this, but seem very concerned with Taylor's position in the entertainment industry and as one of the biggest stars on the planet. And yet, especially in this recent conversation and podcast she had with Travis, she seems to have so little to say about the current state of the world and American politics and so on and so forth. Now, personally, as somebody who tends to be very politically plugged in, I don't go to Taylor Swift to sort of like, hear about how things are going.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. but I would worry for you if you did.
Right, exactly. But simultaneously, I understand the importance of like, somebody who's in her spot, in her position, could certainly bring awareness to certain things that they wouldn't have known about otherwise, even Basquiat by having a book in the background. So I guess I'm curious as to where like, your opinion falls on that kind of perspective of her and her public presentation, especially given that like, I feel like there are some kind of low stakes ways she could even engage in topics like this, especially given that like multiple times, Donald Trump has just basically given her an in to say something about him just by virtue of like coming online and being like, oh, she's not even hot, da 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 da, and just like attacking her in the most vicious and personal and gross ways. Certainly the kind of commentary that like, probably much smaller, maybe other kind of like music industry peers wouldn't get away with, because she'd put them on blast immediately. But, again, in my view, Donald Trump's made it pretty easy for her to fire back just by virtue of him kind of like making it personal.
Well, he's a powerful person and he could actually probably do some serious harm to her if he like really trained his gaze at her and she decided to pick a fight with him or pick a beef with him. Like that could end in a way that no other public enemy of hers has before. She usually always has leverage and the leg up. And unfortunately, against the president of the United States, like you don't, even if you're the most famous pop star in the world, you still don't have what he can, I guess, amass against you. I have a complicated perspective on this because I've watched it unfold over time. It's kind of like whatever she says is not enough. And whatever she says is wrong as well, whenever she says it. And sometimes it is even counterproductive to whatever she is trying to address. Taylor is the very best at addressing things when they directly pertain to her. So when she spoke up about reproductive rights, about Roe v. Wade, like those are the kinds of things that she can understand. I mean, I think one of the most powerful things that she has done was during the Me Too movement when she, pursued her assaulter for $1, like that symbolic measure of standing up for herself. That was an incredibly important and not directly political thing, but like it was a situation that she did with the intent to make a statement. And I think that when she has tried to really get political, it betrays how shallow her understanding of these issues are. Like when she really tried to do the LGBT thing with Lover, she really only ended up encouraging a conspiracy theory that she was supposed to come out as a lesbian and didn't. Like people were confused as to what gay rights had to do with Taylor Swift's personal brand. And it's because everything that she says has to be mitigated through the lens of me, I. It's very difficult for her to address issues that go beyond her direct sphere of influence and impact. And again, when she does speak about them, it's not as though she's contributing something incredibly eloquent and articulate to the conversation. We also need to like reassess our understanding of what celebrities' function in society is. To me, pop stars are like court jesters. They're there to like keep the mood light and fun while other things are going on. And I do think there have been a few studies that have shown that like celebrity advocacy doesn't really make that much of a difference, especially when it comes to like elections, et cetera. It might get people to register to vote, but it doesn't necessarily move voting in any specific like needle shift. If anything, it can be counterproductive and put people off. So I think that like she's in a difficult position where whatever she says is going to be wrong and not saying anything is also wrong. So I think she's currently adopting the position of the royal family, which is like never complain and never explain. She just kind of doesn't wade into it at all. And she says very little of anything ever. It's not that she's not just talking about that. She doesn't really talk. She's not pontificating about like what her favorite book is, what her favorite music is right now. She's kind of silent. It's a one-way communication where she's just talking about the work and then leaving everything else up to interpretation. And I guess it really depends on what you want from people. I think it was a mistake of hers to make it part of her personal brand to come out as a Democrat in the Miss Americana documentary. That is one of the most humiliating periods of her career. It was very difficult to watch that happen and watch her grapple with trying to have some sort of political awakening at like 30 years old and watching and also seeing the people around her, like how insulated and what a bubble she lives in. It's not a good idea for her to tie her ship to advocacy because she's not good at it and it's not in her best interest, I think. So like, when she's done it, it's been kind of embarrassing and it has not made any tangible impact other than the very vague things like register to vote. Those things are good. General, like Taylor Swift says, you should go and use your like exercise your civic duty. That's a good thing for her to do. Her weighing in specifically on an issue with a take, you don't want to hear it. That's the thing. You say you do, but when you hear it, you're going to want to say, shut up.
Zachary, I appreciate you again coming on and talking with me about all of this. This has been a great conversation. You've been super thorough and observant with your answers, and one of the best interviews I've had in a while. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much. I have to get you back on Swiftologist to really hold your feet to the fire for some things that you've said.
Anytime, please. Anytime. All right. Thank you once again. This has been great.
No worries. That was a really fun conversation. Great questions.
There you have it. Shout out once more to Zachary for the conversation. Make sure to check out his stuff down below. Thank you for watching. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Taylor Swift, forever.